Imagine you were reading a blog post.
Okay.
The author, who proudly identifies himself as a former campaign volunteer for Barack Obama, is aggressively demanding something. He's demanding that the mayor of New York City completely renounce Islam and prepare for an apocalyptic holy war.
Which is, quite a leap from standard campaign volunteering.
Yeah, a massive leap.
Okay.
And a war, he claims, is actually prophesied by ancient Hindu scripture. I mean, he is absolutely relentless. The rhetoric is incredibly militant.
Right. He's claiming there's just absolutely no room for coexistence.
Exactly. And then just inches down the exact same page, without so much as a line break, he shifts entirely. Suddenly you are reading this calm, meticulously researched, highly academic defense of ancient Babylonian fertility cults.
Like ritualized temple prostitution.
Yes. It is the ultimate digital whiplash.
You basically go from a manifesto of absolute religious purity to a scholarly exploration of complete physical surrender. And it's all under the exact same URL.
It's wild. So today, we are mapping the mind behind one of the most polarizing, chaotic, and frankly baffling digital artifacts on the entire internet. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
So glad to be here to unpack this one with you.
Our mission today is to dig into this single, highly unusual, super dense blog post dated April 29th, 2026. It's from a site called Barackface.
Barackface, yes.
Yeah.
Authored by someone named Paramendra Kumar Bhagat.
Right. And if you're listening to this right now, seriously, strap in. Because this source material just seamlessly mashes together extreme contemporary religious polemics, aggressive pitches for sci-fi and AI textbooks, and deeply scholarly historical essays.
It's a lot. But before we take one single step further, we really need to pause and set some ground rules.
Yes, absolutely. We need to be crystal clear with you, the listener, right up front. The source material we are examining today contains highly inflammatory, uncompromising, and extreme views regarding Islam.
Extremely inflammatory. We want to state explicitly that we are not taking sides here.
Right. We are absolutely not endorsing these viewpoints, nor are we here to condemn them or argue with them.
Our job today is strictly analytical. We are treating this blog post as a sociological and digital artifact.
Exactly. We are here to impartially report on the content provided and examine the entirely contradictory ideas contained within the single author's ecosystem.
Nothing more, nothing less. We are looking at the architecture of his arguments, not validating their substance.
Right. So with that framework firmly in place, let's just step into this world.
Let's do it.
You land on this site. You see these massive, jarring swings between political strategy, apocalyptic prophecy, and ancient Mesopotamia.
It's dizzying.
It really is. So who exactly is the architect of this archive? I mean, I'm looking at this sidebar, and frankly, I'm just confused.
You and me both.
You have an Obama volunteer, which usually implies a conventional, progressive, institutional mindset. But then you see a digital footprint that looks like a war room for the end of the world.
Yeah, to really understand the author, Paramendra Kumar Bhagat, we have to look at the metadata first and the sheer scale of the architecture he's built.
Because it's huge, right?
No, it's massive. This isn't just some fly-by-night account or a burner profile. This is a sprawling encyclopedic digital fortress. The blog has amassed nearly 5 million page views.
5 million. I mean, if you're listening, you might be thinking what I was thinking when I first saw this. Is this just a troll?
Right, but trolls don't usually pull 5 million views over a 2-decade span.
Exactly. The archives stretch all the way back to October 2004. He has been posting consistently, sometimes obsessively, for over 20 years.
Just looking at the sidebars, in the year 2025 alone, he published 1,333 posts.
Wow. That is almost 4 posts a day. Every single day.
Yeah, and in the first 4 months of 2026, he's already at over 400. And right at the top of the site, under that title Barackface, is that core digital identity claim you mentioned.
The Obama thing.
Right. He says, I was Barack Obama's first full-time volunteer in New York City.
Okay, so he anchors himself with this incredibly mainstream political credential. It gives him this veneer of establishment credibility.
Exactly. But then you scroll down his sidebar and see this staggering list of self-published books and novels.
The sheer volume is dizzying. We've got dozens of titles, and they don't seem to share a ZIP code, let alone a single overarching philosophy.
On the surface, they look completely disconnected. But if we pull the threads, you can actually group his bibliography into 3 distinct, massive themes that eventually feed into one another.
Okay, lay them out for me.
First, you have futurism and tech.
Right. Titles like Lumina AI, The $1 Trillion Sun, and Precigenetics, the technology that lets us watch life think.
Yeah, that second one has a subtitle about how photon cells and AI might cure cancer and completely rewrite medicine.
Which sounds like fairly standard tech futurism. But there's a major focus on something he calls agentic AI, set to explode in 2026.
Yes, he talks about agentic AI constantly.
Wait, before we move to the geopolitics bucket, let's actually define agentic AI for the listener, because the source material leans heavily on this.
That's a good idea.
Because we all know generative AI, right? Like chatbots that write emails or generate images. But agentic implies something fundamentally different, doesn't it? How does this author define it?
That's a crucial distinction he makes. Generative AI waits for a prompt. It is inherently reactive.
Right. You type something, it types back.
Exactly. But agentic AI, as explored in his texts, is completely autonomous. You give an agentic AI a broad goal.
Like what? Like running a business.
Basically, like, research this competitor company, compile a financial report, and email the board of directors with a strategy.
And it just does it.
Yes.
Okay.
The AI breaks that big goal into smaller tasks, navigates the software, makes its own decisions, and executes the entire workflow without any human hand-holding. It has agency.
Okay, I see.
And for this author, agentic AI isn't just a cool new software tool. He views it as a literal species-level paradigm shift. He calls this the dawn of the convergence age.
Okay, so he's looking at technology as a mechanism that alters human evolution entirely. He sees AI as a giant reset button.
Exactly. A reset button for civilization.
Which leads right into his second major bucket of writing, geopolitics and economics.
Yes. Here he's written books like AOC 2028, The Future of American Progressivism.
In Trump's default, right?
Yeah, and another one called The 20% Growth Revolution, Nepal's Path to Prosperity.
It's just so specific.
He's intensely focused on global trade, tariffs, the U.S.-India alliance, and massive global economic restructuring.
Which again feels like fairly standard political wonk territory.
Yeah.
Writing about U.S. progressivism and Nepal's economic growth targets makes him sound like a policy analyst at a think tank in D.C.
It does. It sounds very grounded.
But then we hit the third theme, prophecy and religion. And this is where the X-ray machine just breaks completely.
Yeah, this is where things get really intense. We suddenly encounter books titled Kalkiism, the economic and spiritual blueprint for an age of abundance.
And another one called The Last Age, Lord Kalki, Prophecy, and the Final War for Peace.
Right. It's like walking into a massive library where the science fiction aisle, the political science section, and the apocalyptic theology wing were all curated by the exact same mind.
I just have to ask, how does a self-proclaimed progressive Obama volunteer end up writing about the final war for peace?
Yeah.
It seems so contradictory.
To understand this, we really need to understand the theology of Kalkiism that he's constantly referencing in his work.
Okay, let's break that down. What is Kalkiism?
It is rooted in the Hindu concept of cyclical time, which are known as the yugas.
The Yugas, okay.
Right. In this ancient framework, history isn't a straight line moving from the past to the future like we think of it in the West. It is a massive repeating circle divided into 4 distinct ages.
So it's a loop.
Exactly. You start with a golden age of truth and virtue, and society slowly degrades over thousands of years until you hit the bottom, which is the Kali Yuga.
The Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, the age of vice, corruption, and societal collapse.
Exactly. And according to this ancient tradition, when the Kali Yuga reaches its absolute worst point, the god Vishnu incarnates as his 10th and final avatar.
And that avatar is Kalki.
Yes. Kalki, Lord Kalki, is prophesied to arrive on a white horse with a blazing sword.
Oh, wow. So a very martial, aggressive figure.
Very much so. His sole purpose is to destroy the corrupt world, violently end the Kali Yuga, and hit the cosmic reset button to begin a brand new golden age.
So instead of viewing history as a straight highway where we are just driving forward, he views it like a massive combination lock.
That's a great way to put it.
When cutting-edge technology like agentic AI and global geopolitical shifts and ancient Hindu prophecy all click into the exact right alignment, the lock snaps open. The world resets.
Exactly. He doesn't see a contradiction between an AI-first organization and an ancient apocalyptic prophecy. To him, they're just different gears in the exact same cosmic mechanism.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
So he is constantly looking for the mechanism of a global reset.
Constantly. And this grand apocalyptic worldview, this absolute certainty that we are approaching a massive, violent pivot point in human history, it perfectly sets the stage for the first half of the April 29th, 2026 blog post.
Which brings us to the open letter. And the rhetoric here is just unyielding.
It is extremely aggressive. The post is titled, "An Open Letter to Mayor Mamdani on Islam."
He directly addresses Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York City, in the context of this 2026 artifact, right?
Yes. He says, "I can't think of a more appropriate person than you with whom to broach this topic with," and he absolutely does not ease into it.
No, he doesn't. He immediately launches into a severe theological assault.
He writes, and we are quoting the source material strictly here, to be clear, "Islam is the anti-religion. Islam is the religion of the devil. Allah is not God."
It's just a blistering attack. He goes on to claim that Allah, as described in the Quran, lacks omnipotence and does not actually have the power to enter human history.
Let's unpack that specific yardstick for a second, because he isn't just throwing random insults.
Right, he thinks he's making a logical case.
Exactly. He's constructing a very specific theological argument based on what he considers measurable proof of divinity. He demands historical intervention as proof.
And he uses the concept of prophecy as his primary metric, right?
Yes. To the author, a true God shapes the future, and therefore true prophets must be able to accurately predict it.
He literally writes, runners run, swimmers swim, prophets prophecy. It's so blunt.
And he explicitly points to Isaiah from the biblical tradition, claiming that Isaiah's prophecies are still actively coming true today, thousands of years later.
But then he turns around and explicitly claims there is no historic Muhammad, and that absolutely zero prophecies are attributed to him.
It is a fundamental denial of the core tenets of the faith, directed right at the mayor of the city he lives in.
And this brings us back to his obsession with the ancient Hindu epics, right? Which he uses to somehow justify the dark, militant philosophy driving this letter.
Yes, he explicitly invokes the Mahabharata and the Ramayana.
Right. And for listeners who might not be deep into ancient Indian literature, the Mahabharata is one of the longest epic poems ever written in human history.
It's massive.
It centers around a cataclysmic war between two groups of cousins over a kingdom. And a huge part of it, specifically the famous section known as the Bhagavad Gita, deals with the concept of righteous duty, or dharma.
Even when that duty requires you to wage a devastating, heartbreaking war against your own family.
Yes. The author leans heavily on this concept of the righteous war. He uses these ancient epics to assert that there comes a time when diplomacy and compromise are actually spiritual failures.
He writes that the truly evil do not reason, and the truly evil fight to the finish.
He genuinely believes, based on his reading of these cyclical epics, that this current age will end with a war. There's no avoiding it in his mind.
And his advice to the mayor, well, his demand, really, is to attain what he calls spiritual clarity.
Right. He is urging the mayor of New York City to just completely renounce his religion and embrace what the author calls the one true living God.
Why? So that he can prepare for this inevitable clash. The author argues that because war is a cosmic certainty, the forces of good must prepare overwhelming force to minimize death and destruction.
It's this chilling justification for militant preparation. We have to arm ourselves to the teeth for peace.
He extends this justification through a highly specific demographic theory presented in the text, too. He claims that there is simply no such thing as moderate Islam.
Which is an incredibly sweeping statement.
Right. He argues that the concept of peace in the religion is purely tactical. According to his theory, when Muslims are in the minority in a population, they utilize peace merely to gather strength.
It's just biding their time.
Yes. But, and this is a direct claim from the text, once the population crosses a 30% threshold, that tactical peace turns into jihad.
It's like he's describing an immune system response rather than a complex human society.
Exactly.
He's claiming that once a specific numerical threshold is breached, a biological switch is flipped and conflict is suddenly inevitable. But I have to push back on this, just from a logical, rhetorical standpoint.
Sure. What's your take?
Let's look at the actual goal of this document. It is titled, An Open Letter to the Mayor. If you are truly trying to persuade a sitting politician to change his fundamental worldview, is telling him that his God sold him the Brooklyn Bridge on behalf of the devil really going to open up a dialogue?
Probably not the best opening strategy.
Right. The author literally uses that exact phrase repeatedly. The devil has managed to sell the Muslims the Brooklyn Bridge.
He says it over and over.
If you're listening, you know that diplomacy requires at least a baseline of mutual respect. This feels less like a letter meant to actually persuade the mayor and much more like a manifesto broadcast to the author's own followers.
It's highly performative. That is a very sharp observation. It functions entirely as a public declaration of spiritual warfare rather than an attempt at political persuasion. He is drawing an absolute rigid line in the sand. He is demanding pure spiritual clarity, defining exactly who is on the side of the one true living God and who is aligned with the anti-religion of tyranny.
He is establishing boundaries that leave, in his own words, no room for coexistence.
Okay, so we have this incredibly tense, uncompromising demand for absolute religious purity. He is talking about holy wars, cyclical prophecies, and demanding the mayor renounce his faith.
Right. You are scrolling down the page, taking in this intense, rigid rhetoric, and then you just hit a wall of broken video links.
Yes. 7 consecutive YouTube embeds that all just read, "An error occurred. Try watching this video on www.youtube.com or enable JavaScript."
It's so weird. It's this bizarre, stuttering digital interruption right in the middle of a holy war manifesto.
It's easy to look at those broken YouTube links as just a simple web error, a bit of broken HTML. But look at the conceptual leap that happens immediately after them.
Oh, the leap is massive, because without any transition, without any warning, the very same blog post abruptly pivots deep into the ancient past.
We suddenly find ourselves reading a meticulously structured, almost academic historical essay. And it's titled "The Sacred Rite of Mylitta, a Controversial Custom in the Religion of Ancient Babylon."
I remember reading this the first time and having to double-check that I hadn't accidentally clicked away to a Wikipedia page.
It feels like a completely different website.
We just went from AOC 2028 and Lord Kalki's War to the polytheistic, highly physical world of 5th century BCE Mesopotamia. The author has just finished demanding absolute, rigid purity and an uncompromising vision of a single God.
And where does his mind go next? To the exact opposite. To the fluid, communal, deeply physical world of polytheistic Babylon.
It's as if exploring the extremes of religious rigidity forced him to immediately explore the extremes of religious surrender.
The contrast is staggering. The focus of this new essay is on the ancient goddess Ishtar.
Who was a major figure back then.
Oh, absolutely. The text notes she's also known as Inanna to the Sumerians, Aphrodite to the Greeks, and in this specific Babylonian context, Mylitta.
She is essentially the deity of paradoxes, right?
Exactly. She rules over love, sexual desire, and fertility, but she is simultaneously a goddess of war, storms, and political power.
And the essay zeroes in on a specific, highly controversial ritual associated with her temple. This is described by the Greek historian Herodotus in his work The Histories, specifically Book 1, Section 199.
Right. And the author outlines the ritual obligation with striking detail.
Let's break down the rules of this ritual as the text describes them, because they are incredibly rigid in their own way.
They really are. According to Herodotus, every native Babylonian woman, regardless of her wealth or social class, was required to visit the sacred temple grounds of the goddess Mylitta once in her lifetime.
The scene described in the text is incredibly vivid. Imagine the physical reality of this space.
You have women sitting in the massive temple complex, many wearing these crowns or bands of cord on their heads to mark their participation in the ritual.
And the text notes that wealthy women might arrive in covered carriages with a whole retinue of attendants, trying to maintain some sort of social distinction.
But ultimately, they are all subject to the exact same religious requirement.
And then, men, specifically strangers or foreigners, walk among them. When a man chooses a woman, he tosses a silver coin into her lap and has to say the specific ritual words.
"I invite you in the name of Mylitta."
And here's the catch: the absolute loss of personal agency. The woman cannot refuse.
It does not matter how small the coin is either, because the moment that money is offered, it instantly becomes sacred to the goddess.
The act has to be consummated outside the holy ground. After that, she is considered purified, she has discharged her sacred obligation to the goddess, and she is completely free to go home, marry, and live a normal life.
And no one can ever compel her to do it again. It's a profound mechanism of social and religious leveling.
Because every woman, from a peasant to an aristocrat, becomes equal before the goddess in this singular moment.
Exactly. But the text also includes a deeply poignant, intensely human detail noted by Herodotus.
It's actually a pretty brutal detail.
It points out that attractive or tall women usually fulfilled this obligation very quickly, often returning home the same day.
But less favored women might sit in that temple for months, or even 3 to 4 years, waiting to be chosen just so they could fulfill their religious duty and finally go home. It's almost like a divine, inescapable lottery system. It completely strips away personal agency.
Entirely.
The woman has no choice in who selects her, no choice in the amount given, and no choice but to participate. Yet the text goes out of its way to argue that this was not seen as commercial prostitution.
Right. It was framed entirely as an act of extreme religious devotion.
But how does that work? How does a society rationalize this?
To understand the mechanism here, we have to talk about sympathetic magic and the economic structure of ancient Mesopotamia.
Okay, let's get into it.
The payment didn't go to the woman, it went directly to the temple. These temples were massive economic powerhouses. They functioned almost like the IRS and the central bank of ancient Babylon.
Wow, okay. So they controlled everything.
They controlled the grain, the livestock, the land, everything. In the broader cult of Ishtar, sexuality itself was sacralized because it was intrinsically tied to the land's fertility.
So sympathetic magic is the belief that human actions can stimulate divine or earthly actions, like pouring water on the ground to encourage rain.
Exactly. The belief was that by participating in this one-time obligation, these women were ritually enacting the goddess's dominion over human procreation.
The physical act of sex was thought to literally feed the earth's fertility.
Yes. They were symbolically ensuring agricultural abundance, making sure the crops grew and the livestock multiplied, maintaining cosmic harmony for the entire community.
So it wasn't something hidden or shameful. It was a physical offering of life force required to keep society functioning.
Exactly.
So we have this massive societal ritual where every single woman has to participate in this highly structured public act of sacred sexuality to keep the universe running.
That's the claim, yes.
But did this actually happen? I mean, if you're listening, you might be thinking, this sounds insane.
It does sound pretty extreme.
Just because Herodotus wrote it down in the 5th century BCE, does that mean this was a literal universal law in Babylon?
That is exactly the question the author tackles next. The text moves from describing the ritual into a very grounded breakdown of the modern historical and scholarly debate surrounding Herodotus's account.
And the core piece of information the author highlights is this. There is zero direct Babylonian cuneiform or archaeological evidence that unambiguously confirms this was a universal requirement for every free woman.
Wait, let's stop there. For those who don't know, cuneiform is the wedge-shaped clay tablet writing system of ancient Mesopotamia.
As you mentioned earlier, the temples were the economic hubs. They kept meticulous records of everything.
If this was a universal mandate for every single woman in the empire, there would be massive administrative records. We have ancient receipts for individual sacks of grain. Surely we'd have thousands of clay tablets logging this temple duty, right?
Precisely. The indigenous Mesopotamian records are entirely silent on a mass universal mandate of this nature.
While later classical authors like Strabo echoed the story, even claiming it happened at temples of the Iranian goddess Anahita in Armenia, the lack of primary local evidence is glaring.
I have to say, isn't this classic ancient history? We are talking about Herodotus, a man often called the father of history, but who is also frequently called the father of lies.
He definitely had a reputation.
You have a Greek historian visiting a massive rival empire. He brings his own Greek biases, looks at how weird and exotic the foreigners are, hears a scandalous rumor, and writes it down as absolute fact to shock his readers back home in Greece.
It's essentially ancient clickbait. You won't believe what they do in Babylon. It's like looking at Babylon through a funhouse mirror. That is precisely one of the major alternative theories presented in the source text.
Yep.
Historians argue that Herodotus, viewing Babylon strictly from a Greek perspective, likely exaggerated it.
Or completely misunderstood it.
Or intentionally moralized a foreign custom based on hearsay. The actual historical practice might have been far more limited.
The text mentions the Kariatu, right?
Yeah.
Who were they?
The Kadisu were a specific class of professional cultic servants or priestesses.
Okay.
The theory is that Herodotus might have witnessed or heard about the dedicated rituals performed by this specific professional class of women, and he mistakenly or deliberately concluded that it was a sweeping mass obligation imposed on the entire female population of Babylon.
Okay, so it might be an exaggerated myth, a misunderstanding by a foreign tourist. But the author of our blog post seems to think that the historical literalness of the text doesn't actually matter.
Right, he thinks the story is vital anyway, and this is where the author's analysis is really sharp. The text concludes that whether it was a literal universal truth or an exaggerated myth, the account has endured for centuries for a reason.
Because it tells us something profound about how they saw the world.
It perfectly illustrates the profound gap between the religious sensibilities of the ancient Near East and later traditions. In the cult of Ishtar, the physical body and its desires were not separate from the divine.
They were the very vehicles used to honor the goddess and sustain life. The material world and the spiritual world were completely intertwined.
And the text explicitly contrasts this with later faiths. It mentions Zoroastrianism.
For those unfamiliar, Zoroastrianism developed later in ancient Persia and introduced a massive paradigm shift in how humans viewed religion.
It really did. It emphasized a strict dualism, a constant battle between pure spiritual light and corrupt material darkness. It required strict ritual purity.
Yes, and by extension, the author is highlighting the contrast with modern monotheisms, which draw very harsh lines between physical desire and divine purity.
In the modern monotheistic mindset, the body is often seen as something to be overcome or disciplined to reach God. In Babylon, the body was the instrument of God.
Which brings us back to the incredible synthesis required to understand this entire artifact. We have to pull the camera back and look at this blog post as a single, unified digital object.
We really do, because it is staggering. Let's look at the psychological through line here.
It's quite a thread.
On the exact same page, separated only by a few broken YouTube links, you have an author passionately demanding rigid adherence to the one true living God.
He is predicting a final apocalyptic war based on ancient Hindu epics. He is harshly, aggressively condemning Islam as a religion of tyranny that leaves no room for coexistence.
A deeply puritanical, militant, uncompromising stance. He is demanding that the physical world be cleansed by fire to usher in a spiritual golden age.
Yes. And yet, you scroll down that very same page, and that exact same author is providing a calm, objective, scholarly exploration of a polytheistic worldview where the divine was actively honored through public, ritualized sexuality.
It is night and day.
I'm trying to put myself in his head. What is the bridge? I think we are looking at an author who is fundamentally obsessed with the boundaries and rules of religion.
He is charting the extreme edges of human belief.
On one hand, you have the strict, uncompromising lines drawn in his anti-Islam open letter, the demand for purity and preparation for war. On the other hand, you have the ancient cyclical prophecies of the Mahabharata.
And on a third hand, you have his exploration of the fluid, communal, deeply physical fertility structures of Babylon. He is exploring how civilizations structure themselves around the divine, whether that structure is built on the rigid geometry of a holy war or the chaotic biological imperatives of an ancient fertility cult.
He is fascinated by the mechanisms of belief. We're looking at an author who truly contains multitudes. It's like staring at a digital monument to a brilliantly cluttered mind.
He is simultaneously a futurist, analyzing the absolute cutting edge of agentic AI, an uncompromising religious zealot bracing for a holy war, an armchair geopolitical strategist plotting Nepal's economic future, and a curious historian captivated by the ancient goddesses of Mesopotamia.
It absolutely defies categorization.
It perfectly illustrates how the architecture of the modern internet allows us to house all of our contradictions in one place. Think about it.
Yeah, in the past, these would all be separate things.
In the past, the political operative, the apocalyptic prophet, and the ancient historian would have written in different mediums, lived in different spheres, perhaps never crossing paths. Here, they share the exact same URL on a Wednesday in April 2026.
That is a wild thought to wrap up on. We have taken quite a journey today.
A massive journey.
We started from the prolific, multi-genre, 2-decade-long archives of a former Obama volunteer. We navigated the concept of cyclical time and Kelky's return.
We waded through a highly controversial, uncompromising political open letter directed at a modern New York City mayor.
We unpacked the mechanics of agentic AI, and then we walked straight into the sacred temple grounds of 5th century BCE Babylon to examine the Rite of Mylitta and the nature of sympathetic magic.
It leaves you with something profound to consider about our own digital legacies. The internet allows us to publish our most wildly disparate, sometimes entirely contradictory ideological facets side by side permanently.
We are constantly building archives of our own minds.
When historians look back at our digital footprints thousands of years from now, trying to piece together who we were from the fragments we leave behind, will they see a cohesive philosophy? Or will they look at our broken video links and our clashing worldviews and be just as confused by us as Herodotus was by the Babylonians?
That is the perfect question to leave you with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring the complexities of history, the chaos of modern ideology, and the beautifully messy digital footprints we leave behind. We'll see you next time.